What's going on, Packers fans? Happy Friday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Hope the start of your weekend is treating you well, and thank you so much for making Pack-A-Day part of your daily routine. In just a moment, we're going to be joined by Carmen Vitali. Awesome conversation with her. You're going to want to stick around for that. Before we get there, let me just remind you, did put up a grades episode yesterday as a bonus episode. Make sure to check that out when you have the chance. Also, if you get the opportunity, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, give those 5-star reviews. We always appreciate that a ton. Make sure to tell a friend about the show as well. It's been one of those weeks where I think we're all just trying to get over it, right? We're ready for Sunday Night Football, get this awful Packers-Browns taste out of our mouth so we can go about getting a win against the Cowboys at our home away from home in Dallas, and then get to the bye week, get healthy. Jake Browning and the Bengals come to town after that and kind of just, again, wipe this awful taste out of our mouth from Packers-Browns and get back on a winning streak and hopefully get trending in the right direction again. I think that's what we're all hoping for moving forward. As I said, we're going to be joined by Carmen Vitali in just a moment. Before we get there, just want to remind you, retirewithryan.net. Ryan is awesome to work with. Help me on my retirement journey. Can certainly help you with your retirement journey as well. A free consultation. All you have to do is go to retirewithryan.net. You're going to get his calendar right away, and you literally just book the appointment and you're good to go. And you get a great consultation for free and can get, again, started on your retirement journey. Check it out at retirewithryan.net. Alchemy Wealth Management. You're going to love working with them, and I cannot recommend it enough. So check that out when you have the chance. Also, I just found out, I cannot believe I didn't know this. I have a pizza oven, and I have a crap ton of Luigi's pizzas. I was under the impression that with the self-rising fresh dough pizzas, that you could not put those in the pizza oven, that you had to use a traditional oven. And I have since been educated that you can put the fresh dough pizzas in the pizza oven. And I tried it, and it was unbelievable. Just when I thought Luigi's couldn't get any better, it was all of a sudden better. If you don't have a pizza oven, first of all, this is not a Luigi's ad. That's a must-have in your household. Like a spatula or a pan or a refrigerator or anything else, you have to have a pizza oven. What are you doing if you don't have that? And now you get your Luigi's pizzas. I knew you could put the thin crust ones in there. I knew you could put the Big Dad, all those. Those I knew. I didn't know you could put the fresh dough ones in there. And it was unbelievable. So get yourself the pizza oven first. Then get yourself just 1,000 Luigi's pizzas. And then just, there you go. The rest of your time on earth is set because you can do the Luigi's frozen pizzas, fresh risers, fresh dough pizzas in the pizza oven. And they're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. Check them out, luigispizza.com, and on social media at Luigi's Pizza. All right, without any further ado, let's get to our wonderful conversation with the amazing Carmen Vitali. Joining me now is the one and only Carmen Vitali. You can find her on Fox Sports Radio, of course, on social media at CarmyV, both on Twitter and over on Blue Sky as well. Carmen, it was an interesting week in the NFL, a very interesting week in the NFC North. You never want to be the 1-3-1. The Packers were that 1-3-1 in the NFC North last week. But before we jump into all of that crap, how the heck are you doing?
I'm so good. Forewarning, I have my dog in here with me because it's just him and I right now. So he's got no one to look after him outside of this room. So if he pops up, just know that he means well and he just wants to be part of the conversation.
Like I told you off the air, 2 guests are always better than 1. So that is more than welcome at any point in time, and probably has more interesting things to say than either. Just kidding. But no, we'll dig into all of it, of course. Let's get right into this Packers collapse against Cleveland. A very frustrating week. Packers fans not exactly thrilled at the moment. You start 2-0. You get a big win against Detroit. You get a big win against Washington. And then you go to Cleveland and go 2-1. And of all the possible iterations of Green Bay starting 2-1 on the season, this by far and away the most unlikely way to get there, by beating the 2 really good teams and then losing to Cleveland. But your thoughts on the Packers coming off a very epic collapse at the end of their game in Cleveland?
Isn't that why we love this game, though? Is because on any given Sunday, any given team can beat any other. We celebrate the parity in this league, and I think it's rightfully so. And so this is kind of what comes along with it. This is the, the not so great part, but you don't get the great parts if you don't have some of these parts. And honestly, despite what Packers fans are saying in my mentions, that Browns defense is a really good defense. And they had a really good game plan coming in against the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love was under pressure almost every snap. you had the offensive line injuries with Zach Tom going down early in the game, and that shuffles things around. And shuffling things around up front when you have arguably the best defensive player in the league on the other side of that is not good. That's not fun for anybody, and that's going to throw anything off. So the success rate wasn't there. Josh Jacobs couldn't get into a rhythm either. I think it was like 2.1 yards per carry was his average in this game. Yeah. And that's not going to cut it. And especially with Jordan Love under that much pressure, they had a really good game plan going in. And that's not a defense that lacks for talent either. Even aside from Myles Garrett, you have some really good defenders on the back end there. And I just think that, this comes along with the territory. I don't think that it's should the Packers have won that game? Yeah, but I think there needs to be a middle ground between, oh my God, the season's over, and hey, acknowledging, yes, the Packers should have won, but it's okay. And there's still a lot of football left to play. And at the end of the day, if you were to say you were 2-1, through the first 3 games this season, would anyone be concerned about that? Like, not knowing, which teams they actually lost to, but like at the end of the day, the Packers are 2-1. That's fine. That record is fine. And, perhaps it's partially our fault too for getting on here last week and saying you couldn't find fault with the Packers roster. And I said it too, because you really can't. But again, that goes back to the parity in this league of it doesn't necessarily matter if you have a faultless roster when the game gets going, there's things that happen, and that's all there is to it. So I just you can't ride the wave like we were talking about before. You can't ride the roller coaster. Otherwise, it's going to be a really long season. You have to kind of try and take a bird's eye view and take stock of who the Green Bay Packers are as a whole and what it's going to look like going forward. And I still think that the outlook is very, very good.
What I always recommend is taking a look at it from just a slightly different perspective. So, for example, barring a tie, either the Baltimore Ravens or Kansas City Chiefs are going to be 1-3 following this week. And I'm sure their fan base is going to be freaking the heck out. Whatever team that is that starts 1-3 is going to be freaking out. As an outsider's perspective, is there anyone, and maybe it doesn't end up being this way, but is there anyone that's thinking right now of like, oh, the Chiefs or the Ravens are completely screwed. They don't know they're probably going to be fine. They're going to probably be in the playoffs. They'll probably make their run. They're just too good of teams to not be involved in it in the end. And you just assume that they're going to figure it out at some point. And Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes will probably be in the playoffs and making noise and making things a huge pain come playoff time. And for the most part, that's how other teams are viewing Green Bay right now too, of like, oh yeah, they're probably very frustrated that they're 2-1 following a loss to Cleveland. They're still going to be in the playoffs at the end and making things frustrating for opposing teams and have a say in it. Like, you just have to take a little bit of a step back and be like, you know what? There's going to be some bumps along the road and it's never fun and you have to grow from them. And if you don't grow from them, it's all a moot point anyway. It's not going to matter in the end, but you have to have those moments of growth, just like the team in 2010 did, just like the team in 96 did. And if you don't have those, you're never going to learn and you're never going to be better when it matters most anyway.
Yeah, and not that there's moral victories, but the Packers did some good things, in this game against the Browns. And when you're talking about improvement week to week and learning from things and all of that kind of stuff, that's where seasons are won and lost. It's not necessarily in the result of each game, although obviously if losses build up, that's one thing. But if you're learning from each of your mistakes, you're learning from these games, then the outlook still looks great. I mean, I look at what the Packers defense did against the Browns, and granted, we know the Browns offense isn't the best, but there was 29.8% success rate offensively for the Browns. I mean, they weren't effective, 4 of 13 on third down. Like, those are all really good things. Packers had 2 sacks. I mean, especially last year where sacks were a little bit harder to come by. If you would have heard those stats from the defense, you were like, okay, they figured some things out. And yes, it was, again, the Browns offense. But we have every reason to believe that this Packers defense is still ascending and still, they're getting more comfortable in this system in their second year. And it's paid dividends even against good teams. So I'm not worried about the long-term success of this team like we talked about before. And I fully expect, for as good of a coach as Matt LaFleur is, to have a bunch of corrections and improvements and things to work on and improve on this week and to keep moving forward and inevitably learn from this loss. And you're going in to an opponent this next week where you should be able to put a lot of that to practice.
That's the hope. Well, I want to start with that first point that you made there about Matt LaFleur. I think there is certainly some frustration in Packers land, whether it's warranted or not, with Matt LaFleur, that there seems to be a game or two like this every single year. Sometimes it's coming off of a bye or an extended period of rest where the team is just maybe not playing quite up to their standard, whether we want to call it laying an egg or whatever the case may be. They go into a game like this and it just doesn't feel like they are clicking on all cylinders the way that you would expect them to. And does that reflect poorly on Matt LaFleur? Just your kind of perspective on Matt LaFleur, the coach, and just some of these things kind of coming up over the course of his years as head coach in Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, name me a team that doesn't have these like insane losses or like questionable losses or whatever. Now, I understand there's a pattern there of, like you said, the extended rest. And while it's needed, and I think you take it every time, it does kind of throw off your rhythm. It throws off the cadence of your practice schedule. It throws off the cadence of these guys and their bodies recovering. I think that some of the coaches that are better at managing this understand that there's maybe a little bit more of a ramp up period, even with just, a couple extra days off. But like when all of the practices are scheduled to the minute, and every day matters when it comes to recovery. Every hour matters when it comes to recovery. I mean, you talk about even teams that play on Sunday night end up having to switch up their schedule a little bit because those extra hours mean something to the teams, to teams. I think that could Matt LaFleur be a little bit better in managing some of these extended rest period times? Sure. But at the end of the day, you're still getting your players rest. And I think that in the long term is where he's prioritizing his players' health. And I think that that's the right call, especially when you do see, look at last year and just like the way that injuries can wreak havoc on gaining any sort of momentum or rhythm to an offense in general or a system in general, that side of the ball in general. Like that is something that he clearly prioritizes the rest over the ramp up period. And I think that that's just kind of a call that he's made. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. If it means that sometimes you do lay an egg coming out of these, okay. But at the same time, does that matter like go down the road when your guys are maybe a little bit more fresher because they've gotten an extra day of rest and they didn't practice as much as they should have in the week off or the 10 days off, they had from the Thursday night game. Those are things that I think like you have your preference as a coach. And I think that that's what Matt LaFleur's preference is. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but I understand that Packers fans can be frustrated with that. I also can understand, though, that Matt LaFleur is a good coach. Like, that is an objective fact. Like, his tenure in Green Bay is proof of that. His record in Green Bay is proof of that. His halftime adjustments are proof of that. Things that he's able to do within games, schemes that evolve, from year to year with the personnel involvement and all that. Like, those are signs of a good coach. And I just think that there are tons of teams around the league that would kill for a guy like Matt LaFleur. I can probably name like 10 off the top of my head. And so it's just one of those things where you have to look at the bigger picture in things and you have to look at, all right, have they gotten over the hump in a while? No. But this one loss isn't going to determine whether or not they do that. It's, I think he's built up the trust to see this thing through for the rest of the season. I mean, what are we talking about here?
No, absolutely. And again, I think obviously anytime after a loss, there's going to be some immediate frustration. His record speaks for itself. And at the end of the day, he will be judged on championships, as will Brian Gutekunst. And if they can win one in Green Bay, if you can get that next to your name, you have a lot more longevity in the NFL and you have just a lot more, kind of stock built in with the fan base. But I think he does a great job of keeping his thumb on the pulse of the team. I think he knows where they're at. And I do think that rest will pay dividends in the long run. The other thing too, this is not an excuse in any way, shape or form, but you were talking about kind of the rhythm earlier. They start with a Sunday 3:25 game. They go to a Thursday night football game with that extended rest off, then a road noon game, and now they're playing a home or an away Sunday night football game. They've just kind of been all over the place with, and then they have a bye immediately following that. So it's not like they're playing like Sunday noon or Sunday 3:25 every single week and can kind of get in that rhythm. They've been all over the place so far, and as the schedule goes on, it gets a little bit more consistent. But right now, it's been anything but, and it does sometimes cause a little bit of havoc trying to get into that rhythm when you've got games all over the place and just aren't able to kind of get in that consistency. So we'll see if they can do a little bit better moving forward on that. You then brought up the second piece of it earlier was the potential to bounce back against a Dallas team that has been anything but good at football so far. How can Green Bay bounce back versus Dallas this week?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you look at that game against Chicago and the defense just looks anemic. And, I think part of that is the scheme, but a lot of that is, and I don't think we've talked about it enough, is that defense under Matt Eberflus was installed with Micah Parsons as a part of that team. And that makes a lot of difference when it comes to just the scheme and the effectiveness and what you plan to do. Because with Micah Parsons on that team, you can conceivably get pressure with 4. Without Micah Parsons on that team, it's very clear that they cannot. And they have injuries in the secondary. And against Chicago, they didn't have Deron Bland. I don't know if they'll have him. I haven't looked at the injury report for this week against Green Bay. But you also won't have CeeDee Lamb on the other side of that. And Dak Prescott without CeeDee Lamb, now it's not as catastrophic, I don't think, as it would have been last year because they now have George Pickens. But it's still now, you can, if you're the Packers defense, you can spend all your time and all your energy guarding George Pickens and frustrating George Pickens, which historically we've seen is very easy to do. So I really think that, and if you can get Dak Prescott, out of rhythm, if you can get pressure on him, he is very prone to wanting to make something happen, forcing those throws into windows he shouldn't. And that you have the defense and you have the secondary that can capitalize on stuff like that. You also have seen through the first 3 weeks of the season that this is a defensive front and a front seven that can get pressure and can produce sacks. Like, this is something that it is vastly improved, I think, over what we saw last year. It's very clear these guys are much more comfortable in this system with Jeff Hafley. And oh, by the way, you now have Micah Parsons going back to Dallas with a whole huge chip on his shoulder because the process of trading Micah Parsons was an absolute circus. And he felt disrespected. And you could not manufacture any more motivation than Micah Parsons already has going into this game. And we know that Micah has the potential to be an absolute game wrecker. He is in most games regardless. And now if you don't think he's going back to Dallas with one goal in mind, and that is to absolutely shred this game, he's going to. I can't imagine him not a world where he doesn't get multiple sacks against Dak Prescott in this game. I really can't. And I'm very excited to see that. And I think that this is, if you're going to need a bounce back game, this is the exact bounce back game you want. You have every piece of motivation going into this team wide. And then you have your best player defensively, at least, as just wanting to go in there and, F shit up. F, I don't know if I can say that on this, but fine. You know what it is. It's FS up. Clearly I cut my teeth around football coaches and because I don't have a very good mouth, but that's what Micah Parsons is going in there to do.
Yes, he is. And I know I appreciate that greatly. And I think he is going to do, and it's just every layer of this adds up really well for Green Bay. Green Bay got their face punched in a week ago. They're going to be super, I think, pissed off and wanting to go into this game and show that that was a fluke and that is not who the Green Bay Packers are. The Dallas Cowboys have not had any sort of rhythm or consistency. You had the Parsons trade that just sort of seemed to derail this team right from the beginning. And then, some of the players that they're counting on in this game, like you said, in the defensive backfield and at wide receiver and on the offensive line are beat up. You have a Packers defense that's playing incredible.
I didn't even get to the offensive line. The offensive line is hurting so bad right now.
Booker is out. It sets up so incredibly well for Green Bay, which almost makes me a little bit nervous of just it seems to be almost setting up too well well, but I really feel that it does. And to your point too, with George Pickens, you can roll coverage to his side. And I think Dak is one of those players where if he gets in a rhythm, he can just start really reeling things off. And now his offensive line is counterfeit. He doesn't have his top weapon. He doesn't have a great running game. The defense, he knows he's got to put up like 30 points because the defense can't stop anyone on the other side. Outside of Brandon Aubrey kicking 70-yard field goals in his sleep, it's like every other advantage kind of goes to Green Bay in this one. And again, it almost makes me a little bit nervous saying it, but it is certainly looking like this is one that Green Bay can bounce back on. Hey friends, it's time to start getting our sleeper picks in for week 4. Vikings, Steelers, our first international game of the year. I think this one's going to be a defensive struggle, so I'm going to be going fewer on a lot of these categories, including Aaron Rodgers, fewer than 202.5 passing yards. I think this Vikings defense is going to be all over Aaron Rodgers, and I think passing the football is going to be extremely difficult in this game. Meanwhile, Jordan Mason, less than 79.5 rushing yards. To me, this Steelers defense is going to make Carson Wentz beat them and make sure that Jordan Mason is not getting the requisite yardage to need to get a win internationally. So I'm going Jordan Mason, fewer than 79.5 rushing yards. And last but not least, Justin Jefferson, more than 5.5 receptions. This is the one that I'm making an exception on for what I believe is going to be a defensive struggle. I think Minnesota is going to feed Justin Jefferson, get him involved early and often, and make him the star of that Sunday morning international game. Just to recap, Aaron Rodgers, fewer than 202.5 passing yards, Jordan Mason, fewer than 79.5 rushing yards, and Justin Jefferson, more than 5.5 receptions. Make sure to get your picks in over on Sleeper. You can get a 100% match up to $100 by using code PACKADAY. Again, a 100% match up to $100 by utilizing code PACKADAY. Make sure to use that code. Check it out over on Sleeper. And make sure that you understand that terms and conditions can apply. So check out those terms and conditions over on Sleeper. It is available in over 25 states. So what are you waiting for? Get after it right now.
And I mean, I have to think about or remember the last time that Green Bay was in Dallas and how well that went for them. So yep. I mean, it's a place that Jordan Love does well. I mean, he's got fond memories from the last time he was there. So I have to think that this is, again, like I said, if you need a bounce back game, this was the bounce back game that you wanted to have, because I get not wanting to say it, but like every advantage, like you said, goes to Green Bay. And yes, I talked a whole lot about parity in this league, and anything can happen on any given Sunday. And I don't necessarily know that the Cowboys are going to roll over either. I mean, Dak Prescott is a very good quarterback, and I think that there is still going to be a challenge there when it comes to the things that he can make happen, and the fact that their run game isn't where it needs to be, but it was improving. You have the offensive line injuries, which kind of derail that too. But you never know. You never know. At the same time, I mean, like I said, the table is set for the Packers to have a statement game in coming back from that loss to the Browns.
I'm right there with you. Is there a key matchup or X factor that you're kind of watching for in this one that you feel could swing the game one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, it's up front. It's that offensive line, which is very hurting, like on the interior in particular. And we've seen kind of the dividends that having Micah Parsons has paid for guys like Devontae Wyatt on the interior of the Packers D-line. And it's like, okay, go then. Like, that's the shortest path to the quarterback. That is how you can affect Dak Prescott the most. That is what is going to force Dak Prescott into some decisions that maybe he doesn't want to make, or, forcing the ball into windows that he's not supposed to. But I really think that in order to set up the Packers secondary for some of those takeaways that we know that they can get, I think it starts up front and and exploiting all of those injuries along the Dallas defensive or offensive line.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think the offensive lines on both of these, with some of the injuries that they have for, again, BB and Booker up front for Dallas, and then for Green Bay, Zach Tom and Aaron Banks, how they kind of deal both of these teams with some of those injuries, I think is going to be paramount to both teams' success, and which team deals with it better is going to have a huge advantage in this one. Before we move on from Packers Cowboys, I just want to revisit that Micah Parsons trade for just a moment. It's still very early on, very small sample size overall. Green Bay 2-1, Dallas 1-2. Green Bay's defense is arguably the best in the league. Dallas's defense, arguably the worst in the league, or at least in that conversation. This has certainly seemed to be a deal that has worked out as well as could be expected for Green Bay. it's kind of been as bad as could be expected. There hasn't really been much pressure up front for Dallas. They've already had to go out and sign Jadeveon Clowney. He likely makes his debut this week for Dallas, but we don't know where these 2 first-round picks for Dallas are, going to end up for them or what they ultimately get out of it. But I'll let you kind of define it. But for me so far, I think this has gone as well as possible for Green Bay and about as poorly as possible so far for Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about the key matchup here, it would really help the Cowboys to exploit the injuries on the Packers offensive line. If, I don't know, they had a guy like Mike Parsons.
Yep.
It's unfathomable to me that you give up Micah Parsons with the intent that maybe you could end up with Micah Parsons, but it's not a sure thing when it comes to these draft picks. Like, especially if the Packers are as good as we think they are, you're picking in the late 20s in the first round, and I can't fathom. Like, I know that Jerry Jones likes to harken back to the Herschel Walker trade and how that produced 2 Hall of Famers, but now you've just set yourself up for the most ludicrous expectations of, to make this worth it, you need to produce 2 Hall of Famers in this next draft class. Like, that is just asinine in so many ways. I cannot fathom how things devolved so poorly that even Jerry Jones didn't want to pay Micah Parsons. And then on top of that, all right, say the best thing happens. Say you do end up with 2 Hall of Famers. Are you going to want to pay them? Because historically, you've shown, if you're Jerry Jones, that you are not willing to pay your good homegrown players, or at least you don't pay them until your back is against the wall and then they're able to bend you over with their contracts. I mean, for 2 contracts in a row now, Dak Prescott has no trade and no tag clauses in his contract. That doesn't benefit the organization in any way. That gives Dak all the leverage, which I am more than okay with. I love that for Dak Prescott. But the same thing with, CeeDee Lamb waiting to do his contract. When he was eligible for that that extension, you could have gotten him $5-10 million cheaper a year. And yet you waited. You had to pay him top of the market money because he is a top of the market player, and reset the market with him. So I'm like, if you're already going to do that with these guys, like, why do you make them work for it? And Micah Parsons, to his credit, was like, I'm fed up with this too. Like, business is not done with a handshake these days, Jerry. You need to get an agent involved when you're talking tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars at this point. Like, that is just, it is such a weird way to do business. It's just an unfathomable way to do business. And it never made sense from the start. And credit to Goody for going out there and paying the price that it took, knowing that, getting a surefire Hall of Famer for the price of 2 potential picks that could yield Hall of Fame. I mean, it made all the sense of the world for the Packers to do this. It made absolutely no sense for the Cowboys too. And we've seen that now week after week to start this season. The Cowboys defense needs Micah Parsons. They no longer have Micah Parsons. And the first reaction I had when this went down was like, oh my God, Matt Eberflus is just punching air right now, because this was the focal point of his defense, and it's now gone. And you have no time to adjust.
Yeah, the biggest loser of that trade might be Matt Eberflus for sure. That's a punch in the gut right before the start of the season, and this has the ability to be the exclamation point on this trade. Well, obviously the exclamation point would be a Super Bowl win, but for the here and the now, Green Bay going in, beating Dallas, and Micah having a huge game would certainly put a little bit of a cherry on the sundae of what's already been a unbelievable trade for Micah Parsons. Let's take a look back last week for just a second, because as we're looking at this Dallas Cowboys game, we can also quick kind of take a look at the NFC North. While doing so, the Chicago Bears last week were able to pick up their first win against this Dallas Cowboys team. Caleb has his best game of the season. This Ben Johnson offense.
His best game ever.
Yeah,
we're being honest.
Yeah, that's probably true. Luther Burden gets going a little bit. DJ Moore, it felt like this was a little bit more of what Chicago envisioned in the Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams era. It's a little bit like Russell Wilson had 5,000 yards against him in week 2, and now he's bet. We'll see if Chicago can carry it over, but this was certainly much better from a Bears standpoint.
It was, and I had the same talk with Bears fans that I inevitably am having with Packers fans, where I'm like, you cannot swing each week, across the pendulum, because it's just going to be a long season if you do it. And so, the Bears, obviously, like the game against the Vikings and then the game against the Lions where they hung 50 points on them. Like Bears fans were down bad. And then, this kind of brought them back to life so extremely that they are now talking Super Bowl again. And I'm just like, okay, wait, let's just take our cues from NFL quarterbacks, because every quarterback I've ever talked to is the same way, where they're like, I never get too high, I never get too low. And I'm like, okay, because things are never like, and any coach will tell you when you watch tape, things are never as bad or they're never as good as they seemed at the time. Yeah. And I like, that's how I carry, my, like how I watch teams now. And, I've retained some of my fandom, but like, I think a lot of it has been beaten out of me by doing what I do, but that's okay. I think in general, like being a fan where you just kind of try and stay level for the most part is always better than making these drastic pendulum swings. But it did seem like the Bears figured some things out in that game. It did seem like, just from a procedural standpoint, no pre-snap penalties, which was a vast improvement over the 2 weeks prior. Caleb Williams seemed to be breaking the huddle with plenty of time. There were no like, oh my God, you need to take a timeout, burn a timeout because the play clock is winding down. It seemed like he was much more decisive. His footwork continues to get better. He's going under center almost double the amount that he was in the prior year in 2024. So that's something that like provides kind of some context, because he talks about footwork a lot. And I don't think a lot of people really understand what that means. But the fact that he's lining up under center completely changes all of the footwork and all of the timing and all of the rhythm of the offense. And, you have like lining everything up for him. It takes a little while when there's that drastic of a change. And so we're seeing some of that kind of click, like he's matching and he's marrying up, his 3-step drops with his 5-step drops, and, where those routes are in relation to where he is in the pocket. And it all seems to start clicking. And so now you want to see them stack it. They have to go on the road. They have not had their first road win. They have not had back-to-back wins yet this season. So that is the kind of the next goal for the Chicago Bears. But the rest of the Division 1 too. So like, for saying that this was going to be one of the best divisions, if not the best division in football prior to the season starting, I'm feeling pretty good about that prediction.
Yeah, Vikings get a much needed win with Carson Wentz and completely, I think shatter expectations, just blowing, just blowing out that game in its entirety. Mm-hmm. And then you obviously had Detroit with a huge win over Baltimore as well on the road. That kind of restated like, hey, we're not going anywhere. We're still one of the best teams in the NFL, which also makes that Green Bay win in week 1 look a little bit better as well. Mm-hmm. As we look ahead to week 4, you can kind of spend your whole Sunday watching NFC North football. You've got Vikings, Steelers in the international window. Then you've got Lions, Browns in the 12 p.m. window, Bears, Raiders in the 3:25, and then Packers, Cowboys in the 7:20 Central Times, of course. But you can spend your whole day watching NFC North football, Carmen.
Yeah, it's going to be great. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing. It's, there's such a fun division to watch. These will all be fun matchups. The international series is just always such a toss-up. You never know what to expect there. So I'm very excited to see that. I mean, I had no real doubts about Carson Wentz coming in, just like from a team. I had no real doubts about the Vikings from a team standpoint. Like, I think that the biggest loss for the Vikings was the fact that JJ McCarthy is now like, his development is stunted further because of this injury. And that's the last thing that you could have afforded if you're JJ. But if you're the team, I mean, Carson Wentz has played a lot of football, and you have arguably the best quarterback developer in the league, arguably the best coach in the league in Kevin O'Connell, who won Coach of the Year last year. So I didn't really have a whole lot of worries or concerns about how the Vikings were going to fare. Now it's just, in the long term, what does this do for JJ McCarthy? And does this inevitably slow down his progress to a point where it's no longer viable? I don't know. I hope that's not the case. I think JJ McCarthy could be very, very good in this league, but I'm very excited to see them go against the Steelers. It's going to be a fun one, especially when you get Brian Flores going against an Aaron Rodgers-led offense, especially because we don't know exactly, I think, what to do with the Steelers at this point. I mean, obviously, you don't know how effective Aaron Rodgers is actually going to be this year. Obviously, they've had some really fun games, which is different, I think, for the Steelers fans. Yeah. Like when you talk about like the offense and actually putting up points, and is Aaron Rodgers is he having a little career renaissance in this year with Pittsburgh? But it's going to be a fun one. The Lions, I'm very interested to see what the Browns do against the Lions.
Same.
Like this is, I mean, there's a lot of weapons, but that's very similar to what you face when you face Green Bay. You have a really balanced offensive attack, and that's what the Lions bring to town. So how the Browns we also know that if you get to Jared Goff, you can very much disrupt what the Lions are trying to do, and who better to try to get after Jared Goff than Myles Garrett? I fully expect the Bears also to have a really tall task against the Raiders, because I think the Raiders Pete Carroll is still one of the most well-respected coaches in this league. I still have questions about their offensive line. I think it's still developing, and that's been hard. But Geno is averaging 7.1 yards per play under pressure, which is like 7th most in the league.
Yep.
So he's he can do it. This is nothing new for Geno being under pressure, and so he can handle that pretty well. So I'm very interested to see all of these matchups, up to and including obviously Packers, Cowboys.
The NFC North is favored in every single one of these games. If I told you right now it was a 3-1 week again this week, who's the one? Who gets the loss?
The Bears.
Okay.
The Bears.
I think Minnesota and Flores really get after Rodgers in that game. I like Minnesota in that game. I think Detroit pulls it off against Cleveland. I think Cleveland will put up a little bit more of a fight too, but I think Detroit probably got the warning sign from Green Bay losing. I think they probably are going to learn from Green Bay's mistakes and probably take care of business there. I think Green Bay takes care of Dallas. I'm with you. I think if there's maybe one that gets surprised or upset a little bit, I think it is Chicago as well. But I think Chicago will have their opportunity to win that game also. Could very well be a 4-0 week in the NFC North. Carmen, I cannot thank you enough. Epic stuff as always. Where can we find all of your awesome work?
Just go to Carmen V on Blue Sky and on Twitter, Instagram too. That's where I put all the stuff that I'm doing. I have my weekly radio show on Fox Sports Radio on Saturdays. Not that Packers fans care, but I do a Bears podcast for Marquee Sportsnet on Wednesdays. But we do go around the NFC North quite a bit, and much to Bears fans' chagrin, I'm always very complimentary of the Packers. And
absolutely. We keep our friends close and our enemies closer. So we love keeping an eye on all of that stuff. We've got the Paul Farrington Show Vikings fans coming on every week. So no, we kind of keep everything very close knit here in the NFC North, and just kind of keep an extra close eye on everything. Carmen, I cannot again thank you enough. Follow her over on social media at Carmi V, both on Twitter and on Blue Sky. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL on both. Pack a Day Podcast, wherever you get your favorite podcast, 365 days a year. That does it for us today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.